final exams. The best she'd been able to do was memorize a few basic drinks: martini, margarita, daiquiri, and stash a bartender's guide under the bar. But there was no need for the book to mix plain old scotch and water. She reached for the Glenfiddich and looked up to meet the bright gray eyes of the scotch and water drinker. Some might have said those eyes were silver. Pretty, but they put Mary in the mind of a vampire. The color was at odds with his caramel-streaked brown hair. Good looking, though. He had the kind of look her father would have approved of: short hair, clean-shaven, and no visible tattoos. He wore a flower in the lapel of his tuxedo jacket, so he must have been a groomsman. Judging from his size and age, he was probably a teammate of the groom. Not that she watched hockey, despite working most home games. On the rare occasions when she had a break from fetching and toting for people who could afford to sit in an ice suite, Mary studied. "Rocks?" she asked. He looked slightly amused. No rocks, thank you." She got the feeling she'd said something wrong. She'd been proud of herself for calling ice rocks, thought it sounded bartender-ish. Did people not say that anymore? She poured the glass half full of scotch and finished filling it with water. "There you are." She handed him his drink along with a cocktail napkin embossed with "Amy and Emile, December 22nd. If he'd looked amused before, he looked slightly horrified now. "Is that not all right? This is the only brand of scotch we have." "No, that's very good scotch. It's fine." He took a sip, but he didn't move on. "Do I know you from somewhere?" Unholy hell. That could only mean one thing, since it was unlikely that he would have looked up from the ice during a game to see her serving nachos and beer. He'd seen the online topless calendar. It had been out of date for almost 2 full years now, not that anyone looked at it to schedule appointments. It had been 6 months since anyone had recognized her from it, and she began to think it was behind her. But it looked as though it was going to follow her for the rest of her life, and she should have been prepared for that. She'd had all the information. The online calendar, put out by the most widely read men's magazine in the country, sold millions of copies every year. They'd told her that before she'd posed, had been proud of it, but she'd fooled herself into thinking no one would ever recognize her. Why had she posed bare-breasted for that damned calendar? Never mind. She knew the reason, and it wasn't even a good one. She hadn't needed the money to pay for an operation for a relative, and since she'd had a great job and full-ride private scholarship at the time, certainly not for tuition. Life had been good, but had it been good enough for her? No. She'd wanted to go on a stupid skiing trip with some rich classmates who turned out to be assholes, so she'd posed to earn the money, thinking no one who mattered would ever find out. And they hadn't for a long time. It was May, right after the close of her 1L year, when the wrong person had found out and she had paid with her job and scholarship. Stupid. It wouldn't have been worth it even if the ski trip had been the acme of all trips, but it had been nothing short of misery. At least the pictures had not become mainstream common knowledge, and no one back in Beaver Crossing knew about them. They didn't even know she'd had to take last year off to regroup and save money, or that she was in the middle of her 2nd, not 3rd year. But occasionally, someone like this good-looking, maybe hockey player would recognize her. She knew the drill. Pretty soon, he would realize where he'd seen her and react in one of 2 ways, depending on if he was single. She glanced at his hand. No ring. Still, he could have a girlfriend. He would either pretend he'd been mistaken, or he'd leer at her and make some disparaging remark. He continued to study her. Finally, he nodded, like he was almost remembering. "Well, bring it on, pal. It's my body, and if I want to bear it, it's my business. I knew going in what I was risking. When they gave me that private full-ride scholarship and a part-time clerical job, I knew Chase and Hendricks and Lee, attorneys at law, didn't take their morality clause lightly. They couldn't, not with Life Rock Mega Church as their biggest client. Like Mr. Chasen had said, it was just business. I gracefully took my medicine, but I won't take your condemnation. It's not like you stumbled onto my pictures when you were surfing the net looking for Bible verses. You had to willfully put in your credit card information and swear you were over 18, asshole." He snapped his fingers and smiled, showing his white, straight teeth. "I know where I've seen you. You work at that store in Soundtown that sells birthday cards."